This is quite possibly the most requested video I've ever done. I don't know what it is specifically about this particular figure that makes everyone want to know my thoughts on it, but I've been probably asked 2 to 3 times a month since starting my channel if I'm ever going to review Siege Starscream. The answer has always been yes, but I just needed to find the time to do it. And yes, this video is on a Sunday. Hopefully, I'll be going back to my old schedule of uploading 3 times a week. I don't know. It was really nice to have just a few days off a week, but it definitely seems to have stunted my growth. I make 1/3 fewer videos a week, and I get 1/3 to 1/2 as many subscribers a month. Go figure. I suppose I'll take this opportunity to say that if you aren't subscribed already, please consider it. Oh, and as for the question of the video, that I constantly forget to make, no joke, I did not decide to stop doing this at any point, I just perpetually forget to do it. But as for the question of the video, why do you think this particular figure is the one that people continually ask for a review of? So, it's finally time to talk about Tetrajet Starscream. The first thing that you're going to notice about mine is that I swapped mine's head with Thundercracker's. No joke, both figures' heads seemed like they were made for each other. Starscream's serious face fit Thundercracker's so much better, and Thundercracker's shit-eating smirk belonged on Starscream's ever-so-punchable shoulders. Well, his shoulders weren't the punchable part, you know what I mean. The second thing that you are probably going to notice about my Starscream is that I've got him repro labeled up, which kind of gives away my thoughts early on this guy if you know me well enough. For those who don't, I'm of the opinion that you should only spend money upgrading an already good figure to make it better, and never to try to make a bad figure tolerable. So yeah, I'd argue that this is an incredibly good figure, and kind of understated as well. Like, until you try to evaluate this thing, you don't quite realize just how good it is. I don't know how controversial I'm about to be with this, but while this is absolutely far from my favorite figure of the line, I think going by objective quality, this might be the best figure from Siege by a pretty wide margin, and it doesn't really present as good as it is. So, let's start off with basically the endless list of this thing's positives. It looks absolutely killer. Siege Starscream is an absolute banger of a design. There was an amount of frustration with Siege from people who thought the designs looked too similar to their normal Earth modes, but Starscream here managed to pull off a cool and unique new aesthetic that is heavily inspired by his old one without going overboard with it. It's kind of hard to put into words just how cool I think this new version of him looks. Every single shape he's made out of is reminiscent of what he used to look like, but completely redone. Every inch of him is bathed in sculpted detail to the point where even parts that would normally look like the hollow underside of something are awash in so much detail any other figure would be proud to call that a feature. He's got a ton of color breakup from the different colored plastics they used, some of which are basically entirely internal. Like seriously, why did his heel spurs and certain joints get the unique gray plastic? That's extra money they didn't need to spend, and on other versions of this figure, they didn't spend. They swapped out Starscream's traditional platform heel shoes for these odd narrow hooves with these strange extensions for heels, and I just can't believe how well they work. This is an incredibly stable figure despite the fact that he's got some of the most insubstantial feet I've ever seen. I mean, there isn't basically any of his foot touching the ground, and yet it's actually super easy to get him standing on one foot alone. Who sold their soul to make these feet work, and why was that your price? The proportions on this are a little off. Like, this Starscream is just all leg. Same as with the ER Optimus. I'm sure it makes the fangirls happy, but he really doesn't come across that way. It's not instantly apparent. By actual measure, these legs are way too long, but somehow that ends up very subtle. I don't know how this does that. And then for a Hasbro product, this is absolutely painted to the nines. I know a lot of people really don't like the Siege battle damage, but there is no denying that this one's version of it used a lot of paint for just that feature alone, and I really think it punches out the appearance on this one. The way it looks just makes me think that his wrists should always be silver. It's nice and reflective, and it was just trying to be fun. And even outside the battle damage, this just got a ton of paint. His chest got a lot, wings, back, feet, nose cone. Like I always say, I'm not big on paint, but this was really trying to earn my dollar, and I do appreciate that. Interestingly enough, the prescribed robot mode has you take his thrusters, whose internal stickers were a bitch to apply, and has you move them to his back, creating a huge gap in the top of his hump, and giving him a plate on his ass. I don't bother with it because it doesn't prevent you from otherwise completing the transformation, and it looks way better. And both heads are well done, but man does the original one not fit Starscream. Most figures tend to get fairly dour expressions, and I get why, but look how much character this gives Starscream. I like this thing so much better than the Earthrise head. Sure, the design has been intentionally changed, but at least wasn't trying to be perfectly G1 and failing at it at the same time. I mean, it light pipes, and fuck that, but otherwise, this just looks so good. Something I kind of tend to forget is that not all my viewers have watched all my videos. So whenever I make a statement like that, my first instinct is to not need to explain it, only to have someone ask. So the reason I hate light piping is that at its best, when you've gone to the effort of blinding yourself by shoving the figure's head through the filament of a light bulb, it looks better than painted eyes. But only in that one circumstance. 99% of the time, they look like shit. Just dead and lifeless, might as well be painted black. Whereas painted eyes may not reach the heights that light piping can, they always look decent. Light or dark, painted eyes look good. And chromed eyes always look amazing, and every figure should have them. But yeah, it's a really good head and a crazy good looking robot. And before I move on like I normally would, since the alternate versions of this guy are just flat repaints, and I only got one of them anyways, I want to cover Thundercracker, cause otherwise he's just never getting a video. Thundercracker looks a lot cleaner than Starscream, and even a lot squatter. Nothing's really changed between the two, but the color palette really alters the feel of this character. His legs even look shorter than Starscream's. How is it doing that? Both figures have very attractive color schemes that are just so different. It's funny how opposite they are. On Thundercracker, here his chest pops out while his waist recedes. On Starscream, it's the exact inverse. And what's funny is how they've clearly reversed the paint they used for the battle damage. It's the exact same scheme, but the stuff that they used on Starscream's wrists got used on the legs, and the legs got moved up to the arms, which might not have been a good call, as it just makes his arms look dusty more than anything, with it being a darker shade. And Thundercracker's left null ray is exceptionally loose, but not as loose as on some other versions of this that I temporarily had and returned for sucking. So yeah, I like both these, and I would have picked up Skywarp if they didn't make him a fucking impossible to get store exclusive! Anyways, the accessories this guy comes with are just his 2 null rays, which don't really look anything like they're supposed to. These were heavily redesigned to look more like assault rifles with odd sniper scopes. I guess so they could be used generically however you want. For some reason, they have blast effect ports on the back, like this is supposed to be some kind of recoilless rifle, or so the gun can have a catastrophic malfunction. Either way, Starscream is getting his face melted off. In my eyes! So the accessories are decent. He got what he needed, but they're a little odd, though not bad in any way. Poseability is a point where this figure shines. You remember how at the start of the week, I was super impressed with the MMC First Aid and its ability to pose? I even requested that it be considered the baseline standard for Masterpiece Transformers. This figure puts that one to shame, and it's a mainline chug figure. Head has more than average range, with basically an equal amount of insane tilt up. Last time I lamented that First Aid couldn't fly. This time I get to say, perfect for a flyer. Shoulders pull a 90 without it being the weird Rodimus shrug. Tiny amount of backwards butterfly with tons of forwards, though depending on how you have the arms, that can get limited. Wings are on a very simple set of hinges that somehow do absolutely everything you need them to do. Like these are so alive, it imbues the figure with this electric quality. Maximum elbows. Wrists have rotation and inwards bend, allowing you to fake sword-wielding wrists. Legs can do the can-can forward, they are unimpeded out to the side, but you have to untransform the back to get basically anything out of them in that direction, and they're still limited there. Maximum knees. And feet with tons of tilt up and down, but have a very limited pivot. This guy honestly poses better than the vast majority of Masterpiece figures, and everything is so well toleranced and designed, it's not hard in any way to get him to do what you want. Now, it kind of achieves that through a slight amount of cheating, but oh well. See, this is a shell former, and that makes it super easy to design a highly posable figure. Because they aren't having to design joints that have to account for the transformation, the joints can just be the joints, and the alt mode just transforms around them. And shell formers are often much maligned for good reason. But the thing is, shell forming is not inherently bad. It's misused a lot because the designers were hacks, but that doesn't make it useless. The main problem tends to not be that it's cheating the transformation, though to be fair, I do find that a little weak, but one, that it tends to make the transformation a little boring and overly simple, and two, and much more importantly, it tends to leave the robot mode with titanic, ugly chunks of kibble just hanging off it in random locations, getting in the way and making the conceptual life of the figure hell. As you can see, this Starscream does not suffer that. The designers of this figure managed to incorporate the shell in such a way that it blends seamlessly. And this doesn't even falter on part 1, because the transformation, while not amazing, is actually pretty good, with the shell not just encapsulating the figure, but transforming itself in an interesting way, being what I think is the first and only Starscream to ever truly integrate the shoulder pylons into the transformation. That one step is enough of a highlight to kind of excuse the rest of the transformation being you just burritoing up Starscream. Of note, I had to doctor this figure myself, as the initial version of Starscream had extreme tolerance issues in the chest, making it so every time you tried to transform him, the front panel would pop off. This was fairly universal, and what I did to fix it was drill out the joint and then peg it on with some copper wire. It was a serious bitch to do, and really the largest negative of the whole thing. And the end result is one of the most, and pretty much only true, space alt modes from all of Siege. You will not mistake this even from a distance for any kind of Earth vehicle. While this is unique and truly interesting, it sadly does not capture even the feel of the original Tetrajets, which I assume at this point we will never get a real version of. Those crappy ones from that long-forgotten third-party company do not count. You will notice that my Starscream has an extended fin. This was just a part that came with the repro labels. I didn't even realize they did upgrade plastic parts. Comes off real easy, so if I ever want, I can go back to the normal look, but I don't think I'll ever want to do that. So yeah, this is a really cool and unique alt mode that doesn't look as threatening as it probably should, and I'm always at a loss for where to put the guns. I just leave them where they are in robot mode, where they should probably actually be lower. They should be on his bicep, not his shoulder. It's also just kind of goofy how blatantly Starscream is scrunched up under there. It would have been really nice if they could have figured out a way to have a more complete shell extend off the wings to seal him up in there. Plus, it's a little silly having the chest cockpit just hanging off his back. It would have been better if they could have had the cockpit stay behind on his chest, with the rest of the plate maneuvering around to the back like it does. I wish I could have completed the trio, but these two do at least still look great together. So, outside some minor flaws with the alt mode, which still looks great from most angles, this is actually a surprisingly good figure. Like, the quality of this figure kind of creeps up on you. It does not at a glance, or even a good look, present itself as impressive as it is. You kind of have to inspect and evaluate it to realize that this is doing literally everything right. The quality with the exception of the chest, which was fixed on all later releases of the figure, is way up there with great joints, great paint, great materials, and an interesting sculpt with lots of love and care put into it. It might be the most posable Chug figure of all time, with all of its joints having fantastic range with the exception of the backwards movement on the legs and having a few specialty joints. The transformation is good despite being a shell former, and it doesn't have any of the typical flaws associated with shell forming, and the alt mode is interesting, unique, cohesive, fun, it's great, as long as you don't look at it from the bottom. The figure doesn't seem like one for the record books, but secretly it's one of the best of the line and one of the best of the last several years. And somehow, despite all of that, I still wouldn't call it one of my favorites from the whole WFC. Well, no accounting for bad taste, and that's not half what I have to say, but it's enough of what I have to say. And I know, you know, what everyone else tells you to do at the end of these videos. So, if you liked what you saw here, please do that. And if you'd like to take it a step further, then please, share this video with any friend you think may be interested. I hope you all enjoyed listening to me